I now welcome Lithgow Environment Group, Bathurst Community Climate Action Network and Central West Environment Council to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity in which you appear before the committee? We'll start with you, Mr Blackwood.
I'm Dr Jim Blackwood. I'm the Vice President of Bathurst Community Climate Action Network. I'm a retired general practitioner with an interest in all of these subjects.
Thank you.
My name's Nick King. I'm the President of the Central West Environment Council, which is an association of 14 environment groups throughout the Central West and basically in the Arana region.
Thank you.
My name is Thomas Ebersol. I'm Secretary of Lithgow Environment Group and I'm speaking on their behalf.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a brief opening statement, then we proceed to discussions. Would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries, please? Mr Blackwood, Dr Blackwood.
I have previously been a member of the Greens, not currently a member of any political party, and have no financial interest in any of the topics to be discussed.
I'm not a member of any particular party, a political party, nor have I any financial involvement in any renewable energy or another form of energy.
Cheers.
I'm a member of the Greens and I have no financial interest in any of these issues.
Thank you very much. I now invite you to all make a brief opening statement. If we can keep it as short as possible, a few minutes, so that we can get the questions, that'd be great. Thank you. And Dr Blackwood, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much. Bathurst Community Climate Action Network was formed in 2007, which is quite bizarre. 17 wasted years. Our brief is to raise awareness of climate change and the impacts that it's having on our community and seek to do something about it. We're a group from many, many backgrounds and many age groups, and our concerns are very genuine. Our major concern is the time factor involved. Now, we regard it as being almost irrelevant to discuss the pros and cons, the pluses, minuses, risks, benefits of nuclear energy. The issue is we need to do something now. Climate change is no longer something of debate. It is happening and it's impacting now. The big thing is the rate that the change is happening. It's getting hotter and hotter, more energy in the atmosphere, much more quickly than anybody had ever anticipated. Every metric of climate change shows that things are getting worse and worse. And we can see that. You only got to watch the weather report at night. Hottest November on record, hottest year on record, ocean temperatures around Australia being 4 degrees more than they should have been. And in Bathurst and Orange, we're living in a bit of a fool's paradise. There's been wonderful rainfall, the whole thing looks fabulous, but it's not going to last. Lithgow is actually at the cutting edge of the challenges facing our world and Australia. It's firstly facing the demise of any of its economic base from fossil fuels, but 4 years ago here, this whole town was surrounded by an inferno, a raging inferno. All the hills are afire, and so those two things are basically what's confronting all of us. The issue is we need to do something now, and we need to do it in a time frame that is going to make a difference. The time frame for the most optimistic nuclear power, and we heard from the previous speakers, doesn't allow us to do away with our fossil fuels. Our world is going to cook. Now, I'm a retired general practitioner. I grew up in a small country town, went to a country high school, and then practiced for 40 years as a GP in Bathurst. And I might add that Bathurst and Lithgow are sort of part of the same community. We regard ourselves as being part of this area. So my connections with my fellow man are very, very deep. I was an old-fashioned GP, cradle-to-grave stuff, and formed deep and meaningful bonds with lots of people. Since my retirement 8 years ago, I've been involved in a range of community activities, and I've always nailed my flag up as being concerned about the world that I'm in. I've been a conduit, as it were, for people expressing their concerns about all sorts of things for most of my life. And the numbers of people that express their concerns to me about climate change now is really very significant. And many of them aren't people who are brave enough out in the community to voice that to anybody else. Now, the Doctors for the Environment Australia has recently produced a document which I haven't got or haven't submitted, but I could if needed, on the health impacts. It was only about 3 months ago released, and it's a comprehensive document detailing the health impacts of climate change on human beings, particularly in Australia, but also the world. I would draw people's attention particularly to the mental health aspects of climate change and the impacts that it's having. My age group are particularly worried about it, but I have 4 kids, 6 grandkids, and I have many connections across the youth. All of them, well, not all, but significant numbers are significantly impacted by climate anxiety. It's a very real thing. When I was working, I would lie awake at night at 2 o'clock in the morning worrying about the health of my patients. Now I lie awake at night worrying about the health of my planet, and I lie awake worrying about the mental health of my grandkids and my community. I would suggest that if nuclear energy is the answer, it's not the answer to our climate change issues, and that this particular, even calling this inquiry and raising the discussions about this, is unnecessarily raising the anxiety of a significant proportion of the community. We should stop even talking about it and get on with what we need to do to transition away from fuels and from fossil fuels. And nuclear is not the answer. We need to stop talking about it, get on with something meaningful, show to our community that we can do it. And we can. The technology's there. It's all there. We can do it.
Thank you, Dr Blackwood. Mr King.
Thank you. Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of the Central West Environment Council, or QWEC, and as I said before, this is the amalgamation or the association of 14 different environment groups which are situated across the central west of New South Wales. Some of the groups represented here are the Lithgow Environment Group, and BCCAN are also members of the Central West Environment Group. As a group, we are vehemently opposed to any coalition proposal or any other proposal to include nuclear power in our energy mix. We realise that members of our towns and the members of our Central West Environment Council, such as Lithgow and Mudgee, are in a position where they realise that they have to transition away from coal and create alternatives to their economies. We're also the Central West is part of a renewable energy zone, which is as we speak, rolling out renewable infrastructure to replace coal-fired power. So we're basically, this whole region is on the cusp of a renewable energy revolution. It does have its teething problems, we know that. There are conflicts, which will be resolved, hopefully, and will result in an efficient renewable energy mix in this region. We feel that bunging nuclear power in at this late stage is just diverting valuable resources and valuable time and energy away from the main game, which is to get us off coal and to create a renewable energy future. One of the things that we're concerned about is the fact that despite expert evidence to the contrary, the coalition continues to press on with their nuclear agenda. Now, we've been told by the CSIRO, which basically is possibly our most respected independent scientific advisory group, that basically nuclear energy is not for Australia. It's too expensive. I noticed that basically this isn't the first time that nuclear energy has been popped up as a solution to something, mainly politically expedient, but it's been looked at in the 1950s, the 1970s, 2006, 2007, 2015. There was a ban for lifting the embargo on the nuclear energy in 2017, 2019, 2022. All of the the results of all of these inquiries have come back with the same answer. It's not for Australia. It's too expensive. We can't do it. Our friend earlier, I'm very impressed with his presentation, by the way, made this very clear that Australia's not right for nuclear energy. And there's plenty of reasons for that, and most of us in this room know that. Another issue is we need to replace our ageing coal-fired stations ASAP. Somebody mentioned when we want to get off coal. 20 years ago, we should have got off coal. That's when we should have got off coal, not 5 minutes ago or 10 years hence. We already have up and running a push towards, and it was generally accepted in the community, the employment of tried and true and renewable resources. We've got wind, we've got solar, we've got pumped hydro, we've got battery storage. It's all out there and it's all moving, it's all happening. By the time, it seems pretty obvious, the Australian Energy Market Operator has said that by the time the coal-fired power stations are retired, which is 200,038, we'll pretty well have online, if everybody gets their shoulder to the wheel, a renewable replacement by then, which would make nuclear energy totally redundant and a whole big waste of time.
Thank you, Mr King. We'll have to just keep going a little bit to get everyone to have a go.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr King. Mr Ebersol.
Thank you. I was told I've only got 2 minutes, so I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
My name is Thomas Ebersol. I speak on behalf of the Lithgow Environment Group. I'm also a member of the Greens. I have built holiday cabins at Nunes in the Wolgan Valley near Lithgow, and I have operated them purely on clean, reliable solar energy since 2001. That's 23 years. That's why I believe in renewable power as the lowest cost and most reliable source of energy for our sun-drenched open country. My background, when I was a student, in Germany, I was involved in the anti-nuclear movement. All those nuclear reactors have been decommissioned by now. I'm coming in Australia and start all over again, so I've come full circle. I'm an engineer and I believe in science as practiced by the government's own CSIRO, IEMO, and most science-based organizations. I noticed earlier speakers were talking about, the importance of fact-based discussions, but they themselves come up with facts that are totally pulled out of blue sky. As such, I dismiss the coalition's plan for 7 nuclear reactors, and I see it as a campaign to postpone the rollout of renewables in the name of continued business for the fossil fuel industry. This nuclear power fantasy is the most expensive option, with backup of gas the second most expensive. If carried out, development will take many years, whereas renewables are already here and necessary innovations in storage are already happening. There are 3 big batteries and 1 pumped hydro project in the planning stages for Lithgow. And I want to dispute earlier comments that there is no public consultation. Being an environmentalist, we are run down with writing submissions, attending public hearings. It's very stressful, and it certainly happens. Consultation has happened in all of those plans for Lithgow. My biggest concern is nuclear brings enormous risks for the present and uncounted future generations, especially in regards to the unsolved issue of radioactive waste. It is immoral to force this onto present and future generations instead of developing our unlimited renewable resources. I'm sure you've been made aware of the many reports arguing against the plan. For us in Lithgow, I want to draw your attention to Lithgow Environment Group's submission. It's number 315 in your system, and I've printed it out, and I want to hand it out for the attention of the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to the Deputy Chair first on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming along today and providing your evidence. Dr. Blackwood, I might start with you, if I may, and your comments about climate change and the need. I think you said the need to do something now. I think, notwithstanding the sometimes robust debate, even on this committee, there is at least a bipartisan agreement on the need for us to reach net zero and to take action on climate change, which gives rise to this sort of a debate about what's the best pathway to go about doing this. I take your comments about the need for speed, and I want to ask if you are aware that the top 5 fastest decarbonisations of electricity grids in the world, 4 of them, 4 of the 5, are due to nuclear energy. Are you aware of that? And would that sort of fact influence your thinking about how quickly one can decarbonise?
I'm not aware of the studies that you're quoting. I have spent my whole professional life not being an expert on anything, and when I needed to find out something, I would go and consult experts. So I'm very willing to look at that. But my awareness of the time frame involved, and previous speakers have alluded to that, but the time frames involved in developing the legislative and physical stuff associated with the power plant, the nuclear power plant, are just not consistent with the speed that we need to undertake changes to bring about climate change benefits.
And thank you for being open-minded, and I will share with you, I can do that after this, that study, which does show that nuclear energy helps decarbonise at speed. Would it also influence your thinking, knowing that the Coalition's plan is not renewables or nuclear? In fact, it's an and proposition. Our plan is actually a balanced energy mix informed by best practice around the world, which does include continuing to roll out renewables, but also to have zero emissions nuclear energy in the mix. Does that...
Objection. Zero emissions doesn't exist with nuclear.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Blackwood?
Sorry, lost the train of thought there. Look, I have looked at the Coalition's plan in some detail, but it inevitably will lead to a significant slowdown in the development of renewables. It will lead to a significant investment risk from the private sector. So the amount of effort, energy and resources that are going into the renewable sector will by definition be reduced. The speed that we need to do things at will be reduced, and it's not possible for us to survive for 15, 20 years at the present rate of fossil fuel consumption.
I'm not sure about the speed, but in terms of, I'd contest that part. But I think it is accurate to say that once you do have nuclear energy in the mix, it will require fewer transmission lines, fewer renewable projects, which leads to my next question. I'm happy to open this up, if you like, to each of you. The committee's heard from, I know there's 2 existing Green member, former Green members on this panel. The committee has heard from another former Greens candidate, actually, Tyrone Delisle. He's from We Planet. He represents now. And he spoke about the importance of climate change and reducing emissions, but also the risk of destruction to our natural spaces by taking, in my language, a renewables-only approach, not his. But in his language, he said, meeting the energy challenge by betting everything on wind and solar means sacrificing vast areas of land and disrupting ecosystems. This isn't a path that reflects environmental stewardship. So my question then is, knowing that you all care too for our environment, do you agree or disagree with Mr. Tyler, Mr. Delisle, that despite the enormous land use required for a renewables only grid, that this would be a concern for the environment?
Look, nothing comes without a cost. All of the proponents of the need for climate change action accept the fact that there are going to have to be some sacrifices made in terms of mines to dig up precious metals to make turbines or whatever, or some land use. But those prices are relatively small considering the benefits that the community and the planet will get from making some small sacrifices. I'm not aware of those, we need to do something now. We can't afford to wait. We need to do something now. That is the big all-consuming thing. Our climate is on fire. Our planet's on fire. We need to do something. Our kids, our grandkids, they're going to be the ones who are suffering. I am grateful for the fact that I'm the age that I am and I've led the life that I have, and that I'll be out of here soon and it won't be a concern to me, but it is to younger generations, and the speed of doing things is the thing that needs to happen, and this is not consistent with that by any parameters whatsoever.
Thank you, sir.
I agree with Jim, but we've had, as I said earlier, the Central West is part of a renewable energy zone, and there have been considerable problems establishing the infrastructure. One of the problems is, and this has happened with this particular issue, is that the people running the wind farms, and I've been associated with wind farms. There was one at Flyers Creek. It took nearly 20 years for it to get up. It's now there with 38 turbines. It was subject to a great deal of controversy and misinformation prior to its establishment. One of the reasons being is that the people who were responsible for establishing the wind farm went about it totally the wrong way. They did not employ adequate community consultation, and as a result there was a whole lot of hoo-ha that went on which delayed the project considerably. There are now wind farms established all throughout the Central West. There are the ones around the Mudgee area, which is and Wellington area, which is part of the renewable energy zone. There's been considerable controversy within the community. It was a divisive issue. I don't know whether it's resolved or not. There's 2 wind farms proposals by Iberdrola Wind Farm organisation, which is one of the biggest in the world. It's centred in Spain. It's the people there have come to the community. They've invited people to come and talk to them. They've engaged in appropriate community liaison, which included the taking on board the environmental concerns, of which I acknowledge there will be some, because you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, and there will be but the community concerns, the local concerns, the people who actually live in the area have been invited to come along and talk about what's precious to them, and the actual consultation. It's a long way in the future. This is just a feasibility study. What is really concerning is the fact that the Peter Dutton's party, the coalition, suddenly dumped a nuclear bomb in the middle of Lithgow, virtually. I mean, I know people from Lithgow, they could confirm this, they're here. They found out about it on the news. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah, and so that's one of the things that needs to be noticed. If you're going to do something like this, you have to make sure that the community is consulted, and what's already happening in the community is consulted. I mean, this whole exercise is an exercise, as far as I'm concerned, in arrogance, in the fact that somebody's come along and said, OK, let's put a nuclear power station in your backyard. And so that's one of the things, and I hope this is answering your question, but I'm saying, yes, there are problems. There will be environmental problems. Your person you quoted does have an issue, but they can be resolved, and they have been resolved. There's a whole range of environmental issues which could be put in, but the process has evolved. As far as renewable energy is concerned, the process has evolved, and people are talking to each other. The nuclear power one that's just been dumped in people's laps has not been done well, and to me, I know that the Albanese government, correct me if I'm wrong, said when they came in, we will end the climate wars. Here we go, this is another start to the climate wars. We saw a bit of a minor climate war about here on the desk a minute ago. So we've got to get away from that. We've got to get away from that. And this is why, I mean, we shouldn't even be here talking about this. We should be out there with a bipartisan approach, getting the renewable energy future off the ground, getting us off coal. There should have been this should have happened 20 years ago. I've been involved with this since 2008, and we've just had endless bickering from both sides of Parliament. While, as Jim said, we're fiddling while Rome burns. So let's get real and start forgetting about diversions, political tricks. Let's get on with it and let's get off coal.
I agree with Jim and Nick's statements earlier. Coming back to your question, we always have an effect on our environment. We start breathing in oxygen when we are born, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. The effects we have as humans will always have an effect on this environment. Now, it's a matter of scale, and we know we have to act to combat climate change. Your proposal is way into the future. We need to act now, and we need to act with renewables. The least expensive, the most climate neutral option that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr O'Brien. And we'll go to Dr Ryan.
No questions at this point. Thanks, Chair.
No worries. Thank you. Ms Mascarenhas.
Hi. One of the things that I wanted to have a sense of is whether, I'm interested to understand the consultation processes and whether you think that from a genuine consultation process, whether that should be one where you don't actually get to have an say on the outcome, or whether you can actually have the opportunity to either vote for a nuclear power station and see it built, or alternatively vote against it and see it not built.
I only caught a small amount of that question, but basically...
Repeat that question, Ms Mascarenhas, just to be sure that we got the right thing on that.
I'll repeat it. So from a consultation perspective, there's a spectrum where you can you can consult or inform people, or alternatively, you can actually empower people to have a say on the outcome of the decision. Would you prefer it to be an inform and consult where basically it's kind of really lip service, or alternatively one where you can basically say whether a nuclear power station actually goes ahead or not?
Look, I think personally this is a much wider issue than any local community should be making decisions about. This affects the whole planet and our whole country. So it's not just up to one community to vote whether they want a nuclear power station there. We need to get on with a whole range of things in Australia. All of us need to be on board with that. One community shouldn't be making that decision. When it comes to discussions about local renewable projects, that's a different thing altogether. So certainly local views need to be held of great importance there. But for a nuclear power station, it's a worldwide, planet-wide, country-wide decision.
And then my next question is around the discussion around nuclear. Do you have the perception that the discussion around nuclear is really about delaying investment in renewable energy and delaying action on climate change?
Definitely.
Definitely. Yes.
And then do you also think that your community would be positive of increases to electricity bills? What some modelling has shown is that introducing nuclear power into the electricity grid would result in power bills increasing by $1,200 to $1,400.
Absolutely. They would be furious. The baseball bats would come out. Definitely not. They have enough trouble paying their bills as it is. For one of the questions that was asked earlier was about comparing the amount of nuclear in the electricity grid compared to Australia. Have you guys had a look at the amount of renewable sources that we have in Australia? And would you think that Australia is in a unique position because of our renewable energy sources compared to other countries? And do you think that we should invest in nuclear energy accordingly? We should not, because we are one of the most fortunate countries in the world in that we have ample sunlight, we have ample wind, we have a tremendous amount of space which we can use to bring up large-scale nuclear. We actually have a population which is basically in favour of renewable energy. We're at the cusp of a renewable energy revolution. We're at the sort of T-model forward stage, actually, and there's so many things that we can do, and we should have been doing 10 years ago, to replace fossil fuels. So, yes, I think we should get on with it. There is no place for nuclear, because by the time we get the first nuclear power station, if it ever happens, there'll be so much advance in renewable energy that our nuclear power will be redundant and unnecessary. We don't need it.
Final question, Ms Mascarenhas.
Cool, thank you. This is my final question, which is, I actually think Australia can go one further than just decarbonising our grid. We have amazing critical minerals here. We have the potential to create low-cost energy from renewables. I think that we could actually be a part of the supply chain for renewables across the world. Would you like to see Australia play a role in decarbonising not just our country, but the world?
Most definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes. We should have been doing this 20 years ago or 10 years ago. I remember this sort of debate was had. I remember going in 2008, I went to Canberra to the first climate action conference that I'd ever been to. I think it was one of the first in Australia. And these sorts of things, Australia could become an exporter of renewable energy. We talked about then. I remember going to talks with people like Bob Brown, talking about this sort of thing. And for some reason or other, because of our haggling and petty politicking, we just put ourselves behind the 8 ball. So we're now talking about things we should have been talked about 10 years ago. So yes, definitely, we could be exporting renewable energy to the
There's
world.
a whole new industry which would create thousands of jobs. The technology for photovoltaic mass production was actually developed at New South Wales in Sydney, New South Wales Uni. Now, they were smart enough to sell it off to China, where it created thousands of jobs. We have still the opportunity to capitalise on this new demand for renewable energy, and that would create a lot of jobs here.
Thank you, Ms Mascarenhas. Mr Bennell.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to... I'll direct my question to Dr Blackwood, but I want to say thank you to all of you for providing evidence today. Under the International Atomic Energy Agency's best practice principles, they talk about emergency planning zones and the suggested parameters for the initial precautionary action zone, urgent protective action, extended planning distances, etc. So, as a general rule, like the EPZ boundary goes out to 16.6 kilometres, where there's a potential incident of fallout, and then beyond that, there's a secondary radius that goes out to 80.5 kilometres called the ingestion zone. And I note that Bathurst community would likely be taken in that, because I think Bathurst is about 60 kilometres from the Mount Piper power station. And the reason why I bring this up is because I note that your sister cities, Akuma in Japan, which is very close to the Fukushima incident, and I believe that your community billeted quite a few young children from that area. I'm interested to get your thoughts and experience of the people from that area and the complications that they faced being in that zone when there was a nuclear incident. Because let's be frank, for the most part, these reactors seem to be relatively safe, but when things go wrong, it's usually a human error or something that's well outside of our ability to control. And my father always told me, always expect the unexpected. So these things do happen. So I'm very keen to get some of your anecdotal evidence of the young people that you've billeted within your community and the effects that...
Look, I have no personal experience of that at all. I'm well aware that Okuma and Bathurst had a sister-sissy relationship up until the Fukushima plant went up, and then that relationship doesn't exist anymore. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not really particularly interested in the zones around nuclear plants and things, because I think it's a complete red herring and a diversion of what we should be really talking about. Why don't you talk about exclusion zones? There's a whole suppressed narrative about what happens around coal mines and coal-fired power plants, and a safe nuclear reactor close by is basically pretty safe for those around it. A coal plant and a coal-fired power station isn't. Those plumes out there are pumping out heavy metals, nitrous oxides, all sorts of toxic stuff, and that travels for significant distances. The coal plants and the coal-fired power stations here are pumping highly toxic water into Sydney's water supply. So when you talk about the effects within various zones around it, there needs to be publicity of the terrible stuff that's happening there. Just focusing on the fact that there's carbon dioxide out there is bad enough, but then when you look at all the other dreadful things that are coming out of down under the ground and being pumped out there with the community not being made aware of it, that is really bad news. So that's another reason to get away from digging stuff out of the ground and putting it into the atmosphere.
Yeah, look, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Blackwood. I would just clarify too, though, that we did hear evidence recently in Melbourne where studies have suggested in Germany that those that live within a 10-kilometre radius of nuclear reactors, children under the 5, there's been seen to be a heightened level of malignant tumours in those children due to the atmospheric ionisation, I guess, of that area. So
I don't believe Australia should even be facing those risks. We shouldn't be confronting it. Do away with it. Stop it.
Yeah.
thank you. Mr. Ebersole, you wanted to make comment.
Yes. Accidents happen, and we will be subjected to enormous suffering if they do happen in Lithgow or anywhere. I just want to point out that the same guy who's proposing this nuclear dream is also proposing to cut back on red tape and green tape. Now, Lithgow Environment Group has had many experiences with the EPA, which we call the toothless tiger, where incidents happen at the coal-fired power stations or in the mines, and we are there as volunteers to point out when the rivers are polluted, when the air is toxic. It's not the EPA, and even with too much green and red tape already, the system of control is not working. So if he wants to put nuclear power station in Lithgow, he has to increase the red tape to protect the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell. We heard from you. We heard you say earlier, Mr. King, and you all agreed that you only found out about that there was a nuclear proposal here on the news, the evening news. Is that correct?
That's from what I was told by representatives of the Lithgow Environment Group.
Yep. Okay. No worries. And you found out that about on the news, right? It's been 6 months since we found that out. That there was going to be 7 sites proposed around Australia to have nuclear reactors. Do you think it's acceptable to the Australian public that we don't know what type of reactors they're going to use? We don't know the size of the reactors they're going to use. We don't know the number of the nuclear reactors they're going to have. We don't know how much water these nuclear reactors are going to use. We don't know how long they will take to build these nuclear reactors and what will be the first 2 sites around Australia, because in their proposal, which Mr Burnell has here, they are saying they'll start 2 sites first and then the rest will follow on, and that we don't also know how much these will cost. Do you think that's acceptable that the Australian public doesn't know this information?
Totally unacceptable.
It's been 6 months?
Totally unacceptable. Also, how will the safety of communities near the reactor be guaranteed? Where's the nucleus placed to be stored? Can the safety of communities be guaranteed? Can anybody, a proponent of a nuclear power station, say with their hand on their heart that the communities surrounding that are totally safe? Yes, you're quite right. There's absolutely none of that's acceptable to the public, nor should it be. It's
Thank you very much.
completely unacceptable.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And Deputy Chair, when you pass on the information to Dr Blackwood about the 4 or the 5 the quickest decarbonising areas where with nuclear, could you just table that for us as well, please?
I'd be very happy to do that, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to assist you with answering questions taken on notice today, and you'll have the opportunity to request corrections to the transcription errors. Thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.